Well, we had a great summer. For those of you who missed it, it was a well, it was a summer of TED Talks and sermons and worship. And it was followed by 2 weeks on Unitarianism and Universalism. That just happened. I think those were maybe our best sermons of the year, so you might want to go back and look at them. And now we kick off a new year. We kick it off with a story told, read, and reflected on as a way of speaking of our theme for the year. I love this story. And I have loved this story a long time. I've been sitting on it for years and years. I love it for all the bravado being undercut by compassion. For the proud American finding a way to see his practice outside of him. How the unexpected cut through the real issue. It cut straight to the bone of loss, the bone of despair, the bone of pain and struggle. The original story, told by Terry Dobson, became famous as a Reader's Digest story in the 70s, and then in Ram Dass's book, How Can I Help? Originally, the story was titled, A Kind Word Turneth Away Wrath. Dobson died in 1992. He was 55 years old. He had been a New York Giant football player. He had been a Marine, and he went to Japan to study in a kind of rural development program in 1962, where he learned Aikido from O Sensei, the founder of Aikido, whose picture we used in our slideshow today. Dobson went on to teach Aikido in America, in New York and in Vermont. His autobiography was entitled, An Obese White Gentleman in No Apparent Distress. On a memorial site to Terry Dobson, there's a page dedicated to conflict with one statement on it. It says, the next time you're in conflict, don't resist. When the person you're dealing with finds no resistance, they change. They go to another place. You get into arguments because you want to prove that you are right. So stop thinking you are right. The words of Terry Dobson. Simple advice that outlines the principles of Aikido, which I have just learned about, mostly from my older brother, who is a practitioner. Aikido is a Japanese term. Do means the way, ki means life force or energy, and I means joining. So joining the energy with the way. It's blending that life force with our actions. When I say these words, use the force, Luke, sound familiar? They took straight from Aikido. I was joining. It also can mean love, or love in the sense of peace. The peace, the love we find in peace. So Morihei Ueshiba, who is O Sensei, who we showed in the slides, developed this art of peace after World War II, after Hiroshima, after Nagasaki, to extend Aikido throughout the world, his hope to bring people together. Terry Dobson was his first American student. And so in our story, like anyone who studies a martial art, at some point, that person wants to use it. Terry wants to use force, to be the hero, to save the day. In effect, to be right. What he saw was true Aikido. Compassion diffusing the situation before it became physical, before it erupted, before the peace was inevitable. The compassion questions that we're asking of this story are these. Where is there suffering in this story for you, and how do you relate to it? And as you think over this story and the American sees force as power and the old man sees it in a different way, how would you have reacted if you were on that train? And if you, in your life, are there times when you, more or less, willing to engage, find difficult people who you want to flatten, but might find another way to interact with? The story doesn't necessarily answer these questions, but it points us in a direction where compassion overcomes violence, where compassion overcomes force. Compassion, the state of mind that is non-violent, non-harming, and non-aggressive. It is the wish for others to be free of suffering. It is a commitment, a responsibility. It is a respect toward the other, even in difficult moments. So this year in the church, a year of living compassion, we ask what compassion asks of us as religious people. We ask what spiritual practices deepen compassion. We ask how compassionate action can alleviate suffering and create the beloved community. What will happen this year is each month we will have a story, a central story that we will tell and we will read and we will hear. That story then will reverberate out through the entire campus, from our children's classrooms up through to our adult classrooms and out to our circles groups and beyond. Monday there will be resources on this story, the questions, resources reflecting on it on our website for you to engage with, for you to use with your families and your friends. Today's story, the questions I have just asked, spiritual practice for the month, each will be there for you to use. In addition to Sundays, groups will be engaging compassion, from young adult retreats to classes on listening to an 8-week compassion cultivation workshop. We as a church also have joined the Charter of Compassion as an official partner. And we have members of our church lobbying the 30 cities in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to help pass a resolution to affirm the Charter of Compassion started by Karen Armstrong. So we're taking this seriously. We will be exploring each month sub-themes under our umbrella of compassion, themes around imperfection and empathy and unconditional compassion and listening and inclusion and loving enemies and generosity and compassion in action. And for me, the model extends from one source, the life of the Burmese activist and Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi. In her book, Voice of Hope, Suu Kyi followed a threefold path to compassion. She describes it as this: the courage to see, the courage to feel, and the courage to act. She says, to courageously see the connection between ourselves and those who suffer. Not only do we see the connection and become aware of it, but we allow ourselves to feel it. And finally, it is not just to see and feel the connection, but to act on it. To courageously take responsibility for those who suffer. For Suu Kyi, she describes the movement in her life toward these three things as a movement of change. She calls it a spiritual revolution. And she employed these ways to change her country. She said when she was imprisoned by Burma's military dictatorship, She had compassion for her people who lived under that dictatorship, but she also had compassion for those who imprisoned her. She said, "If I had really started hating my captors, I would have defeated myself." Hatred blinds us to the wisdom of the soul. To see, to feel, and to act. This year we will attempt to deepen our understanding of these guides as we deepen and learn and engage. Friday, I found myself witnessing to this very understanding of compassion in an unlikely place on the couch in my living room. I was watching the women's tennis semifinal. Anybody? Yeah? Caroline Wozniacki and Peng Shuai. In a tight match on national television, a strange thing happened. The Chinese young woman started to cramp up. She started to cramp in her legs so badly that she was backing up into the wall and holding herself up, and she began to weep from the heat and the dehydration. They took her off the court like an animal to the vet. She was twisted. And they gave her some treatment, and she came back onto the court, and she hit 2 amazing shots, and then she cramped again, collapsing to the ground in tears, not only with the pain of her legs, but with the shame of her country watching her. And an amazing thing happened. An amazing thing that doesn't happen often in competitive sports. The Danish player, who had never complained, who had never protested, walked across the court, kneeled down next to the Chinese player, put her hand on her, and said something to her. In an act of compassion, she saw, she felt, she acted. Very simple. Very simple. Wozniacki said, "It was hard for me to watch whenever she collapsed on the court because she knew that the Chinese player had had heart surgery as a child." Can you imagine? She says, "Tennis is great, but our health is more important." Now that is a champion. Not only a great tennis player, but a champion of compassion. We can only aspire to such championship compassion. And I know that we can. Our spiritual work this year will be to see, to feel, and to act in ways that make a difference. Surprise us. Let's see what will come. Start a group to reflect on our stories and the things we put online. Tell us what happens to you when you consider how these things change your heart. Take action. Tell the stories. Submit your compassion photos. See, feel, and act on your heart's calling. Compassion, a state of mind that is nonviolent, non-harming, and non-aggressive. It is a wish for others to be free of suffering, a commitment, a responsibility, a respect to the other, even in difficult moments. In this church, we have a great foundation for this work. Our faith sees God more as verb than as noun. Our faith calls us to know the dignity of every single person we meet. Our faith calls us to make this world a better place without regard for a future reward. We have a good foundation. Can we deepen our faith with a dose of compassion this year? I think we can, and I think we will.